All right, everybody. What's good? What's great? And what's going on? Y'all must not have heard me. I said, what's good?
What's great?
What's going on?
How's everybody doing today? Coming at you live, back in the garage, back with another episode.
Yes.
Back at it again today, guys.
Yes.
We have a very, very special guest today. We have Gabby Placencia from Ward 5. She's running for Riverside City Council. Everybody give it up, give it up, give it up.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's already been a lot of fun, so I appreciate you giving me the time.
We have had some great talks while we've been here. How's your day going? You doing all right?
Wonderful.
All right?
It's great. Good? Great to be here at Talks with the Garage. No. Did I say that wrong?
Garage
We're going to edit that.
Yes. No, it's perfectly fine. But you're running for Ward 5 here in Riverside.
Yes.
And you're running for City Council. What is that?
Well, it's a lot of things. But I think more importantly, what I want you and everyone listening and watching to know is that the City Council impacts our quality of life. So I just want to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about myself. And so I'm a product of Riverside. I attended the public schools. I work at the middle school I attended, which is a lot of fun. Last year, I work at Loma Vista Middle School.
Shout out to all the kids in Loma Vista.
Go Lions. And so it's fun because I had teachers when I was a student that were still there up until last year. So that was fun. They don't age. So clearly they're doing something right working at Loma. But, you know, being a product of our public schools, living in Riverside for about 30 years, I really felt that it was important for me to give back to the community. So that's one thing that has been very important to me in my life, and it's something I'm trying to teach my 4-year-old, Ari, is to really be community-oriented and give back to the community. And so that's why I chose to run, is because I think that with the demographics changing in Riverside, we need to have leadership that really looks like us. And so having an all-male council right now is not reflective of the population. More than 50% of the population is women, and I think we bring a unique perspective. So shout out to all the women out there.
More than 50?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, so if you're single, yes.
I'm not single though. So.
Yeah.
I was just saying
To
There's
the
a lot
listeners.
looking behind the scenes like, yeah, you better say that. Shout out to Renee. Big shout out. But so you're running for Riverside City Council, which is obviously a not the biggest platform in the world, or not the biggest office to run for. Now, we were talking a little bit before, and we kind of discussed the difference between big-scale politics and small-scale politics.
Sure.
And you said something that stood out to me, and it was something to the effect that, on average, big-scale politics or small-scale politics are really our big-scale politics. And our big-scale politics are, on average, our small-scale politics. Like,
Right.
What do you think that really means?
And I think what that means is the impact, right? When you have your senator, your assembly member, they create policies that impact Riverside, but they make these big, wide-scale policies that maybe we don't see how it impacts us here locally on an everyday basis. But small politics, City Council, for example, impacts our quality of life, whether we have great streets to drive on. I heard one of your friends earlier that she, had a flat tire. Maybe it was because the streets where she was driving, had potholes, and maybe that's what led to her.
That was really nice. So we had a flat tire, so
she's the one who had
we got to do
so.
something about this.
Yes, so whoever represents that area, please pave those streets and fix those potholes, because people are wasting money on their tires, right? And so that's what I mean about your daily life, right? It makes you late to meetings. It makes you late to these kinds of podcasts. And so it impacts our quality of life. And so as a council member, our job is to ensure that we are paving our streets, that we don't have these potholes, that we're trimming our trees so they're not falling on our roofs, and many, many other things that really, really impact us. Case in point, our council members advocate for the types of leaders that we employ. So, for example, our police chief, our current police chief retired. He did a great job, in my opinion, about really respecting the neighborhood groups, the community leaders, and building those relationships and strengthening the partnerships to ensure that police and the community were working together for the common goal. not just to keep Riverside safe, but to really ensure that our neighborhoods and our community leaders had a place at the table, which is something that hasn't happened for a very long time. I think people of color are marginalized far too often. And for me, the reason is because we don't have elected officials that look like us. And so those are some of the reasons why I decided to run, because if not me, then who? Right? I will be the first Latina elected in the history of Riverside. I will be the first woman to represent Ward 5. And
this
to
is
be
history.
yes,
Yeah, give it up, give it up, give it up.
Yes.
So, I mean, this is pretty much history in the making.
Yes.
Okay, that's dope. Okay, so I have a question. So, I feel like the wide scale politics is really in our face because of mainstream media, right? And that's mostly our source of news when it comes to any type of politics or anything like that. So, for somebody that does want to start getting more involved in local politics, what source of like news, like where can we go to keep up with everything that is going on?
Well, your podcast for one.
Okay, there it is.
And social media, right? You know, we need to appeal to a broad audience. In Ward 5 specifically, we have 2 voting modalities. So, you know, the average age is, you know, a 24-year-old, and then as well as maybe a 66-year-old. And so obviously not all 66-year-olds. My mom is 63, I want to say. Don't hate me, Mom, if I aged you. But she, you know, she has Snapchat. She has these things. So obviously she's going to look to the new technology, right? But we need to be able to be accessible to everyone and get our message out there. So for us, running a campaign, we're looking at how we target youth, how we get them involved civically, you know, whether it's us, how I met you, knocking on doors, talking to voters, or, you know, through social media, or really putting it out there that there's some great podcasts that are really having these conversations about the importance of giving back, the importance of being involved civically.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. But as far as like a source that would be like non-biased, like a website or something that gives like the local news, like do you know of any, or like any good suggestions?
You know, my suggestions will be biased. I think it depends on, you're going to gravitate to the source that speaks to you, right?
Of course.
And so when you talk to anyone, you ask them, what national media do you watch, right? Whether you watch CNN or Fox News. If you say Fox News, then what are you thinking? You already made assumptions about this individual. If they say CNN, then you make another kind of assumption. So I think no matter what recommendation I give, it's going to be biased, because we all have those unconscious bias,
That's
right?
true.
So it's just a matter of being an informed researcher and reading both sides of the story, because there's always 2 sides of every story.
2 sides of the coin. I do agree. I do agree.
I really appreciate the honesty there, because a lot of people will tell you, hey, you should go to this source, you should go here, they're not biased, and then you get there and it's just like, wow, there's bias all over this page, you know? And this isn't something I was particularly planning on discussing, but it's weighing on my heart heavy. Who are you planning? Do you have any planning on voting for any person you're thinking about voting for in the next presidential election, while we're on the topic of big scale versus small scale?
So I've been so consumed with my own campaign that I haven't had a chance to watch any of the debates. I haven't really had a chance to do my research. I'm a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat. Clearly, I support women as well, but it needs to be a candidate that we share values, right? I think sometimes there's this perception that because a woman is running and I'm a woman, I need to support them. But if we don't share the same values, just because we're both share the same gender, it doesn't make us the same. And so I think that's some bias that, you know, is put on us, right? And some stereotypes. So I think once in 12 days, when I have won my election, I will have, I have some stuff saved on my DVR that I need to get to, because clearly I'm an informed voter, and not just locally, right? But nationally, we need to make these important decisions that impact all of us. So I'm not by any means saying that 2020 national politics don't matter. They definitely matter. But right now, what we have in front of us is a local election that is extremely important.
November 5th, by the way.
November 5th.
So please vote. Get out the vote. Talk to your neighbors, your family members, anyone that you know is registered to vote. This is historic, as you mentioned. Not only will I be the first Latina elected, but we have an opportunity to elect 3 other great candidates. One being, she will be the first LGBT woman on council. And these things are important because we have community members that are LGBT, that are young moms. You know, a few of the candidates running have kids. So my priorities, my lens will clearly be different than that of a 65-year-old white man, right? And I'm not saying that they don't have value in what their priorities are, but we need to have that balance. And so that's what I'm looking forward to, is to making history and making sure that we're working in partnership with our community.
All right, that's fantastic. Now, and speaking in partnership with your community, there, and you've told me this, there are some certain people who are looking at taking advantage of our communities in certain ways. And I believe we call these people carpetbaggers, right?
Yes.
All right. Want to make sure I got the name right.
Right.
All right. And so explain to me kind of what a carpetbagger is and why we should care about that.
Sure. So what I love, one of the most things that I love, I guess I would say, one of the great things about Riverside is that we have a very tight-knit community. So we're like a big little town, right? And so the good thing about Riverside is that we take care of our own, we advocate for each other, and when we have someone come from the outside and want to tell us what our issues are and how they're going to come in and be our savior, that's a problem for Riversiders. Regardless if you're private sector, public sector, blue collar, white collar, we take that very, very personal. It's kind of like that high school fun. What were we talking about earlier? You know, the La Sierra grad over here, Norte Vista go Braves over here.
Shots fired.
Exactly.
All of us here.
And so a carpetbagger is somebody that comes and moves into our community and wants to run for office, but they don't understand our community.
Because they're not from here.
Because they're not from here. And
is that going on, like, currently?
It is going on. My opponent has only lived in Riverside for about 2 years, and he is trying to, tell us what is good for us and what is not, and how dirty our city is, and how he's going to come in and save us from the corruption. And so that's a problem, not just for me, but our neighbors, our city employees, because it's hard to tell someone that you just moved here. You don't know us. You don't know our values. You don't know our history. So many times when I knock on doors, the connections I make with people, because I have deep roots here. And so we don't need someone to come into our city and tell us how we're going to make it better. We already think that Riverside is amazing, and I just want to strive to make it even better. And so shame on those carpetbaggers for trying to move into certain cities and tell those people what works for them and what doesn't. So that's essentially a carpetbagger.
All right, that's I was gonna say that's fantastic, but that's not fantastic.
It's not really fantastic at all, no.
But
we need to make some shirts.
It's
No
great
to
that
carpetbaggers.
Yes, and we need a little sign. Mike, where's
Get
Mike
on
at?
that.
But yeah, and speaking of people in our communities who we need to really pay more attention to, we were talking a little earlier, and we mentioned the connections between the Black and Latino community, and how we're two communities that run very parallel to each other, but sometimes it doesn't seem like that. Sometimes it feels like we're perpendicular when all we're trying to do is, attain the right, equal rights, you know? How do you feel about that specific dynamic between our two communities?
So having been involved with different nonprofit groups, different community leaders, and events throughout the years, throughout the community, I've really had the opportunity to meet some great community leaders in the African American community as well as in the Latino community. And so what I was sharing with some of you earlier was that it's about those partnerships. It's about showing up for one another for our events, and it's not just when, you're doing an MLK walk and you want us to walk alongside you, which we commit to, which we do, but it's about real social justice issues. When you have something that you're advocating for, whether it's our organizations or yours, that you show up for us and we show up for you. And we have a long-standing relationship with many of the groups in the community where we've done that for very many years. And so people who move here don't know that. They just make assumptions about our relationships and that we have these racial tensions, and that's not necessarily true. We show up for one another because we're stronger when we're advocating on each other's behalf. And I think that the elders of our community, we have so many wonderful elders that I think have paved the way, and it's our duty to just carry that torch forward to make sure that we're not going to be divided when these issues come into our community.
Yeah, I like that. I really do think it's important. I think that it's like a relationship that we have, you know, and it's growing. And I'm not gonna lie, like even when I was in high school, like the only type of like war fight that you would kind of hear about is like black versus Mexican, right?
Oh, we said riots.
You never heard. Oh, the Asians and the whites, they fighting again. Yeah. The Asian, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I really do like the fact that we are, you know, coming together as a community, right. and really like unifying. I think that's what makes the most difference. Sure. You know.
Well, you have to see the value in that, and I think we do have some community leaders and some elected officials who see the value in that. And so when you have candidates who, you know, look like me or look like you, and they decide they want to run because they want to have a positive impact, not just for social justice, but for economic growth, for our youth, for whatever it is you believe in, then that they need to stand with you and support you and be the first one to advocate on your behalf. And so it needs to be about who values those relationships. And I think there are many great people in Riverside who do value those relationships, who will call certain neighborhood groups, certain community members, community leaders, and say, hey, La Sierra is having some racial tensions. What elder can we bring in to have these conversations about how we work together and how we get past our differences? Because knocking on doors day in and day out for a very long time now, I have realized that no matter where you work, how long you've lived in Riverside, we can always find common ground. And what that common ground is, we all want Riverside to thrive. And so when we focus on the positive things, how we can really get to that goal by working together instead of focusing on our differences, I think that's how we really move the mark on putting Riverside on the map.
No, real talk. I'm thinking back now, and like there were more than one like riot, and I'm thinking like if somebody would have just brought everybody into the gym, like we do for the pep rallies, right? Sure. Like we do for if we would have brought everybody into the gym and just had somebody speak to us as kids, I feel like the school really did drop the ball when it comes to something like that.
For sure, I think it's also about who they employ, and that goes back to the electeds and the school board and those that they hire to work at these schools. Where's the cultural competency, right? Where's the training to ensure that these conversations are happening, that these activities are happening, so that you don't have riots between the races? And so, you know, there's so many opportunities, missed opportunities, and I think it's because for far too long, when was the last time we had a superintendent of color, right, who was navigating these systems and making these decisions for our students? Yeah. When we don't have representation, when we don't have people that look like us, who have our lens, then, you know, it's going to be hard for that positive change to happen.
How do you think how do you think we start getting more people? How, like, what is, because I know that that's not taught in any high school, is how to start getting elected. Like me specifically, I want to run. My ultimate dream, and we've talked about this before, is to become governor of California. Shout out 2044.
He is going to do that.
I don't even know if there's an election in 2044. That was a lie. But no, seriously. And I know for myself personally, that's always something I've wanted to pursue, but never had really any inkling of how to start that. How does one start towards the path of, even if it's not becoming as high as governor, even if it's just starting a local election? Like what's
Well, I think it's about, you know, reaching out and now having the context, right? I think we talked a little bit earlier about you start with your community, with your elders. You know, we have some really great nonprofits in the area where you can start getting involved, and they have different missions. And then you kind of, you know, promote to either getting appointed to a board or a commission for the city, maybe a multicultural council or whatever it is you're passionate about, right? And you slowly start there. But I think it's important to get involved with a local campaign. So please feel free to come out and knock on doors with me this weekend. Shameful
this
plug.
Weekend?
Yes. Anytime. I go every day, actually. But so whenever you're free, come by, even if it's for an hour or two, and really maybe you'll meet some great people the way I met all of you when I was knocking on Kevin's door.
Yeah.
I don't even know how long ago, maybe a month or two ago.
Yeah, maybe a month.
Yeah, and so you start there. I think it's just being willing to learn. You're never going to know everything, right? But I think you putting yourself out there, asking the conversation, asking the question, how do I start? And don't worry, we'll get you involved soon enough.
All right, you heard it here first. Yeah. Riverside City Council 2021 was
That's right.
I would like to see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
We definitely need different representation, and different. I think different generations, because there's also generational difference that I found when I talk to voters. Some voters, I'm too young for them, and I'm like, really, I'm not that young. Trust me, look at the gray hair. But then you have the younger voter that they feel, the millennials, where they feel like they can't, really understand where I'm coming from. So it's always trying to find that common ground. But I think it's an opportunity. And so why I really was excited about coming here is because of this opportunity to get that message out. And it's a call to action, right? How do we get youth engaged and talking, having real conversations, beyond Snapchat or Instagram or YouTube, right? It's about what's happening in your backyard. Do you want to be, work towards improving it, And so I think you have this opportunity with this platform to really create positive change. So I commend you for putting yourselves out there.
Oh, thank you. We try our best to foster great conversations as much as possible here on the Garage Talks podcast.
Yes. Don't forget the talks. Don't forget the
Garage Talks podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that'll just about wrap it up for us here. Election November 5th. And before we get out of here, Gabby, we had one more thing we wanted to talk to you about, right? And that was, and this is directly related to how your local elections affect you on a daily basis. So what's happening is, and I believe you can correct me if I get this wrong, but our old police chief, he's out, right?
Yes.
We have an interim in right now.
Yes.
And what the problem with that is we live in Southern California. Here in Southern California, there are a lot of immigrants and a lot of people who are very worried about ICE, even to the point where parents would stop driving their kids to school when Donald Trump got elected because they were afraid they were going to get picked up and taken by ICE. So we had literally had kids missing school for this. And what the great thing about our police chief here in Riverside was he was very anti-ICE, very against everything that they stood for, and he held certain protections for us, and he was allowed certain protections because he is the police chief. But now because he's not anymore, this is something that can affect our people. How do you think it could affect our people, and what do you think should happen moving forward?
Right. So I wouldn't call him old. I mean, he is
former.
Yes, our retired police chief, in case he ever hears this, he'll kill me. And he gets real bold now that he's retired. But so he...
You know how bold I'd be if I was a police chief?
I know, right? And so, yes, he had created this foreign nationals policy so that when, our police officers were out in the streets, either pulling someone over or dealing with certain crimes or individuals, they weren't asking these citizenship questions. It was about what that... crime was, or, if they had pulled someone over. And so he had a really hard line about not working with ICE and not letting them into our city to do these raids, because he knew the importance of building these relationships with our community. Dang. He knew that we wouldn't be able to solve crimes if he allowed this to happen. And so with our interim police chief, he, was... groomed by our former police chief, and so, but he's not ultimately the permanent police chief. And so with the national search, my concern for our community is that this impacts our quality of life, right? I mean, you hear, driving while black, driving while brown, and all these things that happen to our community members. And for, the 9 years our former police chief was here, we had lower rates of these incidents happening, right? No one's perfect, so I'm not trying to paint this pretty picture that there are no issues. But what I'm saying is, when we have someone who represents our community, who has those values, who wants to protect all of our community members, whether you're black, brown, or white, undocumented or not, that's important. That's an important value for Riverside. And so it is our responsibility on council to advocate for an individual who gets hired, who has those same values, who will not allow our community to be marginalized further, who will not allow for our undocumented community to be criminalized for these things. And so that's what your quality of life will be impacted. And so when we talk up to voters, you know, I tell them this is what I will be doing, is advocating for these types of individuals to be our leaders at the city, to make sure that they work for all of us, not just the small few. Riverside's demographics are changing, and the very leaders, the electeds, need to reflect that. I can't stress enough how important this election is. November 5th is right around the corner, 12 days out. And it's going to be historic. It's going to change the trajectory of Riverside. It's going to really be life-changing for you, for my kids, for people's grandkids. And that's what's so exciting about this. So if we can really let the voters know, everyone who's listening, you know, vote November 5th. Whether you have your ballot at home, please make the time, vote, mail it. If you're going to the polling place November 5th, please attend, please go vote. I know we get busy working, trying to put food on the table, but this election is historic. There hasn't been a majority of the council that will be new. I think it's 40 or 50 years the last time this happened. And so I know for a fact the last 40 years haven't been good to people of color in Riverside. And so it's time for change. So if you want to get involved, you want to get engaged, please let my campaign be the first campaign you work on. I will make it fun, I promise. Please visit www.gabbyforriverside.com. Please come out, check us out. Please check my website out, sign up, and get involved. This is where it's at. Your quality of life will be impacted.
Most definitely. I just want to put a little bit more emphasis on that. I think that for my generation and I'll say for my generation, me especially, I noticed that we have a progressive mindset, right? We want good and we hope for good. I think that the thing that we lack is initiation. Like, we have to act. And I think this is the perfect time to do so, because everybody would like to get on any platform and talk about the things that we have an issue with, but this is a time, and I'm speaking for myself too. I ain't voted for a local. This would be my first time.
Wow.
Right? So I'm not gonna sit up here and lie, but it's now, right? Like the choices that we make today are going to affect tomorrow, and it's going to happen like that.
The time is now.
Yes.
No, really. No, seriously.
Gabby Placencia for a better life.
Yes.
Really.
My slogan's for a better Riverside, so you were close.
Nah.
No, it is. It is a call to action. Yes, it is. Look at my card. It is a call to action. And look at what happened, right? I knocked on Kevin's door. I met all of you. We're talking to, millions of listeners, right? Because everyone's going to subscribe.
Millions.
And
like, comment,
now you're going to vote. And you haven't voted. Why? Because you haven't been excited about a candidate, even though we don't live in the same ward. But guess what? Now you're going to vote for whoever's running in your ward, and hopefully the next election you will get involved, right? And that's the whole point of this. And that you giving me this space, you having this platform, is going to create that positive change. So now you'll be an active voter, and you'll be called a high propensity voter. That's our lingo. And so I'm prepared to, in the future, have workshops about how you can get involved, how you can really run a campaign, because it's not easy, but it's not rocket science, right? You just have to have the willingness. And you are very, very bright, both of you. The future governor over here will be doing fine. But it starts here in Riverside, right? You need to start getting involved. So come out and knock on doors with me so you can learn how to talk to voters, so that when you sell yourself for governor, you will be an expert.
I'll have to. I got to get out there soon.
Nice.
I think that will officially end it this time. Let's have a round of applause for Gabby. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much.
It was great having you.
Thank you. It was
if we haven't drilled it into your heads enough, November 5th, Ward 5, Gabby Placencia.
Thank you.
Don't make a life, don't take a life.
You hear me?
Thank you. Good night. Good night.